that we've had some issues with an echo on the line in the past. It sounds like that's not going on right now. But if we do, I'll put it into presentation mode, and then I'll just pause. And if you have any questions, you can just type them into the chat box. But for the time being, I'm going to leave the line open. So feel free to just jump on whenever something comes up. Cool.
Okay.
Radical. Okay, so first of all, thanks for joining. Again, this is Ben Crosby. I'm supporting the rollout of STAR Enterprise this year, and our school is K-8. Last year, we obviously did it in K-2, and I'm sure many of you were involved in that process as well. So things haven't changed that much, but I just want to give a sort of summary today of sort of how everything will work, and then answer anything that actually comes up in the meantime. Okay, so here's the agenda, why STAR, and then we'll talk about how to get ready for testing, how to run an actual test session, schedules. I think I'm actually not going to get into the student growth piece today just because it seemed like it wasn't that relevant last time, and then we'll do next steps, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, so some just quick background on why we actually went with STAR this year. So because of our move to the Smarter Balance test last year, and actually going forward, this year is effectively this weird gap in growth. So last year we obviously gave CSTs and the SBAC, but the SBAC was a field test, which meant that we didn't get any actual data out of it. Calculate growth between last spring and this spring using SBAC. And so the first year that we'll actually be able to measure growth using the SBAC isn't until 2015-16. So that led to this question, how should we measure growth for our students in 4th through 8th grade in 2014-15 this year? So it's actually 4th through 8, I'll just say quickly, because K3 we will be using STAR this year and actually going forward is the plan. And then in grades 6 through 11 at any campus that is only for secondary students, they'll actually be taking ACT Aspire. So basically, like any student that's at a 4th through 8th grade campus that's like elementary would actually take STAR. So going back quickly. So last June we were sort of faced with this issue of how are we going to measure growth this year, and we basically put out a survey to all 4th through 8th grade teachers, and we basically said, what do you want to do? So we asked, first of all, how is it that we should measure growth next year, and then should we reduce the overall weight of that growth within your end of year pie? So here are the results. I think we had 65 teachers respond, and what is it, like 63% of them said that they'd rather use some sort of alternative measure just for 2014-15 to actually measure student growth. And then the other result, this is like more mixed, obviously, but if you look at these green pie slices right here, you'll see that for the most part, people were in favor of reducing the overall weight of student growth and increasing something else. So increasing surveys, increasing observations, or some mix thereof. So we are moving forward with both of those plans, and the one that's most immediate, obviously, is adopting ACT Aspire and STAR. So that's the background on why we're sort of rolling out these 2 tests this year. And we went with STAR in K-8 basically because it sort of pulls in a lot of the best aspects of like other assessments that we already use. So it's going to give us mastery level data related to the Common Core, similar to the benchmarks of the past. It's a very reliable way of actually measuring growth. It's a test that's been around for more than 10 years and is taken every year by, I think it's like 14 million students. So it's a very sort of established measure. And then it has this adaptive format that's very similar to assessments that we sort of think that our students are going to see in the future. So STAR itself has 3 subtests within it: STAR Early Literacy, STAR Reading, and STAR Math. STAR Early Lit is built for grades K through 2. It's mostly focused on early reading skills. It has about 30 questions and usually takes 15, 20 minutes to actually complete. STAR Reading and STAR Math, on the other hand, are built for grades 1st through 12. It's aligned to the new standards in both reading and math, and usually takes about half an hour to actually complete, which obviously varies on your grade level and other factors as well. So I'll pause there. Any questions so far?
No.
Cool. Okay. So here's the rollout plan for this year. So as I said, all students K-8 at elementary campuses, so that's a K-5, a K-6, a K-8, will actually be taking STAR in the fall and the spring. The windows in the Bay and the Valley are September 1st through the 26th, so about a month. And then in LA, it's from September 8th through October 3rd. So those are the basic windows. And I will note that LA is later because they end up starting about a week later than our other regions. Every campus will get a class set of iPads or laptops to actually help with testing. And here's the takes what. So kindergartners will take STAR Early Literacy. It should take about half an hour per student. And then first and second will take either STAR Early Lit or STAR Reading and STAR Math. The reason that they'll take either Early Lit or Reading is actually based off their reading level. And so I'll be sending out a document to all first and second grade teachers based off of how students scored last spring that will tell them which test each student should actually take. And then in 3rd through 8th, they'll take STAR Reading and STAR Math. I would note that if you have students that are sort of, very low readers and in 3rd, 4th, and 5th, they could likely take STAR Early Literacy, but we just won't be able to actually measure growth, based off that test. Oh, viewer 6 having trouble hearing. Yeah, I'm not sure. Let me just actually type something into the chat for viewer 6. Please try calling in via the phone number. Okay. All right. Apologies for the delay. While we're paused, any questions on that?
You mentioned that students in 3rd through 5th who are reading below grade level could potentially take the early literacy.
Right.
But you also mentioned earlier that it's computer adaptive.
Right.
In terms of it being able to adapt, is there an advantage to having them take the early literacy over the adaptive one for their grade level if they're 3rd through 5th?
There's not. I think the sort of main advantage. Well, so I would say this: the early lit test is really focused on like early reading skills, so phonics skills, etc.
Right.
And it's less of an actual reading comp test. There are norms on the early lit test that go up through 3rd grade, wherein we can calculate growth. But anything outside of that, it sort of like won't actually count their score. So in the past, we have said if they're independent at like a DRA 8 or lower, 8 or higher, they should take reading. And if they're at a 6 or lower, they should take early lit.
Okay. So it would be used in rare instances.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
No, sure thing. That's a great question. Thanks. Anything else? All right, Radical, let's keep rolling. Okay, and then yes, of course, we'll have this Excel tracker that I'll be sending out to folks that should make it easier to figure out which test every 1st and 2nd grader should be taking. Okay, so getting ready for testing. So the week before you test, you want to actually get in touch with teachers about setting up anything special for any students who have IEPs in terms of testing. You want to finalize any sort of schedules if you're going to be pulling students out for testing or doing it in smaller groups. You'll want to make sure that you get the student logins and passwords from teachers. And I'll be sending out a link to a report that gives you all of those passwords as well. So you can either get those from the teachers or you can just pull those from the report. And you want to make sure if there are any posters in the room where you'll be testing that might aid students, that those are covered up. So that's word walls, number charts and lines, anything like that. Any questions on this page? Cool. Okay, so day of, again, you want to make sure that any posters are covered. You want to have your student logins handy. You want to have a laptop or an iPad that is sort of already set up, plus some sort of other quiet activity, especially if you're testing in a small group. And the pre-test instructions and tip sheet, this will go out both to teachers and to ed specialists. Just so you have it handy. This will help in terms of if you have to pause a test and you sort of forget how to do it. All of that information will actually be on the tip sheet. And I think actually that's it in terms of getting ready. So any questions on sort of how to actually get ready for testing? Cool. All right, so how to actually start a test. So as I said, every campus will be getting either iPads or laptops. On an iPad, you'll see this little blue star thing app on the home screen, and you'll just tap that. If you're on a laptop, you'll be opening up the Renaissance Place website, which is, I would note, the same website both as a teacher and as a student, and you just click I'm a student or I'm a teacher. And then you'll enter the student login and password. Once you do that, you'll be able to actually choose a test, so STAR Math, STAR Reading, or STAR Early Lit. On an iPad, it actually looks like this. On a laptop, you'll see the screen here. And I would just recommend that you actually do the tapping, just because in the past we sort of have students that end up on the wrong test, and then that gets messy. So I would just watch that. Oh, and we have a question in the chat box. Awesome. If we have more questions that come up later, can we email you? Yes, absolutely. Email me, call me. I'm always free to help out. Thanks. All right. Okay. So once you actually log into the test, before every assessment, there's this quick sort of warm-up activity. It's usually 3 questions long, and it has 2 functions. So the first thing it does is it just makes sure that all students know how to actually use the software. They know how to answer questions, etc. So it sort of trains them how to do it. And then it also checks to make sure that the test content is sort of on the level of that student. So this is especially important for STAR Reading and STAR Early Lit. If the student logs into STAR Reading and isn't able to answer those 3 warm-up questions, then it will actually pause the test and won't let them go into the sort of full test itself. It'll say it'll basically pause them, and it'll tell them to raise their hand, and that's when you would come over and just check to make sure that this is the right test for them. And if it's not, you would just have them restart on early literacy. Yep. So if they don't pass the warm-up, then the test will pause. And here's just a sort of sample screenshot for that, for what that would look like. I think this is from the early literacy test. Okay, so if you're in the middle of a test and you need to pause or restart the test, I would imagine that you'd use this if you want to actually chunk a test for students, so they're only taking 10 questions at a time. On an iPad, there'll be a little arrow symbol in the top corner of the screen. You would just tap that. And on a laptop, you just click Stop Test. It'll look like this right here. And once you do that, it'll ask you for a monitor password. That's always admin, ADMIN. And this is the case, just to ensure that it's only the actual, teachers that are either pausing a test or, stopping it completely. Okay, so when you do that, when you actually hit Stop Test, I actually want to back up. So first, keep in mind that every test is timed. So there's a fixed number of time per item, which means that if you want to pause a test, which means that if you have a student who, needs a break for, whatever reason, you would want to make sure that they've actually paused their test so that it doesn't just keep, timing them out on, like every question and then actually counting those as wrong. So when you hit that button, Stop Test, you'll see this screen here. It says either Resume Later or Stop Test. To pause, you want to hit Resume Later. Once you do that, it'll ask you for the monitor password. Again, that's admin. You would have the student go take their break. And when they come back, you just log them back in the same fashion that you did at the very beginning. You would choose the same test name, and then you'll see this sort of window. It'll say, you have a test to finish. It'll ask you to enter that monitor password again. Again, it's admin. And then it'll actually take them back to the same item they were on when they paused. When you actually, pause a test, it's saved for up to a week. So that means that, you could actually pause a test and have them come back, the next day or any day that week, and they would just resume wherever they left off. If it's after a week, the sort of saved test actually goes away, and they would have to restart again from the beginning. If you choose to actually hit stop on a test, that will erase the test, and it means that they would just have to go back to the very start when they actually log back in. And again, the password is admin, ADMIN.
Yeah.
Any questions on this? Cool. Okay, so pausing versus stopping. This question actually seems to come up a lot. So when to pause a test? If there's a bathroom break, brain break, if it's something that is part of their IEP, or if you have a student that is sort of, taking longer than everyone else to actually finish, and they want to come back later, totally fine to just pause them and have them resume whenever they're ready. You want to actually stop a test if there's some event that means that this session is not a valid picture of where they are right now. So, for example, they're in the middle of a test and they become sick. Obviously, they weren't sort of feeling well on the previous questions, and you would just want to go in and actually hit stop test so that they can retake it later. If there's a fire drill, or some other event that would sort of lead you to believe that this isn't a valid picture for where they are right now, again, you would just hit stop test, and any other event that sort of also fits into that category. This is important because the first test that's finished by a student within the actual testing window is the sort of baseline that they will get for growth. So you want to ensure that when they actually finish that first test, that that's really a valid picture of where they are currently. Okay, so moving on to accommodations. So there are two embedded settings in STAR that you should know about that are available not only to students with IEPs, but in fact to any student who you feel would actually benefit from it. So the first is extended time. So as I mentioned earlier, each actual test question is timed. I believe it's 90 seconds for early literacy per item, and then 3 minutes for STAR reading and STAR math. But every teacher has the option to go in and actually give any student that they choose, twice the amount of time that they would normally get. So this is actually only available for STAR reading and STAR math. It's not available for early literacy, but as I said, it's sort of available to any student in the class. The second is that you can turn on audio settings for STAR math. So as it is, STAR early literacy has headphones and it'll read them all of the actual test items. STAR reading and STAR math are basically silent, if you will, but you can go in and turn on the audio for math so that it'll read them, just the actual test questions, I believe. And that's available again to any student in the class. this is a setting that can only be turned on by the actual classroom teacher. I actually don't have the ability to do it on my end. And I would just note that neither of these settings have any effect on scores or student growth norms. So in my mind, there's really no reason not to do it for your whole class. Any questions or comments on these?
So will most of the GE teachers be turning those on anyway?
I think
ahead
so.
Of time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. That'd be my guess, and that's what I'm recommending.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Anything else? Okay. Cool. So other available accommodations. So on top of those two, which are already sort of embedded within the software, you can also change the screen resolution for any students that may have visual impairments. So that will adjust the contrast. This can only be done on a laptop. Obviously, there's the audio for STAR Math, and I'm hearing just some echo on the line. Are you still able to actually hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So there's the audio for STAR Math. There's extended time. Small group testing obviously is available as well. And either as the ed specialist or sort of any adult in the school may also read only the questions for STAR Math and STAR Early Literacy. So that's fine. That's like a normal. That's a acceptable accommodation, and will not have any effect on the overall norms for the test. Also, you can do breaks or have the test chunked. Sort of up to you in terms of what's in their IEP and sort of how you think they're doing within the actual testing session. All of these can be given to all students and will not have any impact on the overall growth score for that student. Any comments on this page? Questions? Cool. Okay, modifications. So modifications, they're really just two big ones. So the first is having both the questions and the answers, which might include reading passages, read to a student. So this is only available to students who have IEPs. And in this case, if this is done, the student score will actually not be counted for their SGP, either at the school level or at the actual classroom level. The other sort of modification is really just an exemption from testing. So if you feel for whatever reason that this student is not a good candidate for testing, they can get an exemption. Again, this is only for students with IEPs, and again, their actual score won't be counted. And then if there's any other appropriate, actually, sorry, this should be modifications down here. If there's any other appropriate modification that you feel like should be given to a student, that's fine. And you would just note that and actually let us know so that we can actually pull their score out of the database. Any questions on this?
So if the student gets the questions and answer choices read aloud, like, will they still get a score, but it just won't count towards like the teacher's SGP?
Exactly.
Okay.
And I'm imagining that we would want to think about that modification similarly to how we would the SBAC, and that it would be something rarely used with a student.
Okay.
Right.
Got it.
Cool. Anything else here? Okay, cool. Moving right along. Okay, so scheduling. I'll be sending out a day-by-day schedule to school teams this evening that will have sort of a calendar for when every actual class will be testing. You should feel free to modify these as needed. Obviously, you want to do what's best for the school, in terms of any other events that are happening or any, one-on-one testing that may occur. And I would just note that as it is right now, all of these schedules are set as sort of whole class schedules, which means that the whole class would actually be testing at once. But obviously, if you want to pull small groups, that's great. And you would just want to make sure that all of the tests are finished by the end of your window. And then the last thing is, I think it's best to only give one test per day, just because in many cases we're testing, like K3s, K4s, and I just sort of worry about their brains melting, So that's it on schedules. And again, those will go out this evening. And that's it. Oh, a couple frequently asked questions, if you will indulge me. We sort of, hear these a lot. So the first is, am I able to see copies or samples of the actual test beforehand? Unfortunately, no. Because it's adaptive, it means that every test is sort of different per student per test. So it's sort of hard to get like one version that would sort of be representative. There are videos on My Aspire that you can view that sort of show the first, like 5 or 6 questions per test that I made actually last year for K2. So if you want to watch those, I think that should give you a sort of sense for, how the test actually looks and feels. The second question, what standards and content are on the test? It's all aligned to the Common Core. So every student will likely start within their grade level, and then because it's adaptive, they'll either move up or down, like if they're very high or very low. So if you have a student who's, who is, 2 or 3 grade levels, below their actual stated grade level, it'll actually, adapt to where they are, and they'll actually see content that's more aligned to their current achievement level. A question in the chat box. By when would you need to know if a student will have the modification of both questions and answers read aloud? Read aloud. So we wouldn't need to know really until the end of the year. It'd be good to have a sense, earlier on. But we'll ask you just to let us know through a document that I'll send by the end of the actual testing window. So, basically by the end of September in most cases. And then another question, if you select test questions and answers to be read aloud, will the test itself read it out loud over headphones, or does the ed specialist need to read aloud to them? Yes, so the ed specialist would need to read it out loud to them, both the questions and the answers. Okay. And then the last item on this page, what is the STAR item format? So all items are multiple choice. This basically is a feature that enhances the reliability of the test. They're like rolling out these new items next year that are more similar to the SBAC, but we aren't going to see those until 2015-16. And that is, I think, it. So just to recap quickly, so your next steps as ed specialists, just reach out to any teachers that you need to talk with about setting up accommodations or modifications. And if needed, I would just ensure that those teachers have turned on the extra time and the audio for STAR Math. And I will be emailing out a sample schedule to school teaching teams. I'll be letting you know when all of your technology will be in place. I'll send you all of the relevant docs that you need to actually run testing. There are like, I think, 2 or 3 that you need to look at. And then, of course, I'm around to actually, help out all throughout the testing window. Email me or call me. I always feel, very popular during this time of year. So it's great to hear from you. A question, if a student is in 6th grade, can the student take the early literacy reading? So they could take the early literacy reading. There aren't any actual, growth norms for the test, so it would mean that their scores wouldn't be counted as part of the overall, growth scores for the school. If you have a student that is in 6th grade and is not yet an independent reader, I guess I would sort of recommend generally that you have them try to take STAR reading, and if they aren't able to pass those, first 3 items that are actually part of the warm-up, then you could have them take early lit instead. Does that answer? your question? Anonymous viewer 10. Okay, cool, thanks. All right, so that's it. I realize that we are right up on 12:30. I want to just thank you all for the shower. Awesome to hear from you all. Oh, I'm on the wrong page now. And if there are any other questions, I'm happy to actually stay on the line. And if not, have an awesome rest of your day.
Hey Ben, it's Megan.
Hey Megan.
I have a quick logistical question that might to teachers, but probably the regional managers. I have 3 long-term subs here in the Central Valley for Ed Specialists. Are they going to have the same access and getting student logins all the same as teachers would?
So if they are not entered into PowerSchool, they are not actually currently part of the system. So
Okay.
If you can send me their names, I can actually set them up so that they're like a co-teacher within the actual class that they are in right now. But that's probably the way to from there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. And then just quickly, viewer 5, will you email this PowerPoint? Yes, I'll be sending it out to folks with the recording of this webinar shortly.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thanks,
Bye.
Ben.